Father's heart. Wake now, my conscience, and justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now, my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiant cheer. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
It's nothing like having everyone in the building a part of the choir. Thank you. Mary Ann will read poems next, but before Mary Ann comes up, I'd like to offer this bit of introduction, because the poems that Mary Ann will read are not just ordinary poems. They were written by Tom's mother, Mary Beerman. She died in 2009 at the age of 97. Mary Beerman was Mary Ann's great-grandmother. And at some point, Tom wrote an introduction to his mother's poetry. Here's some of what Tom wrote. Mom was a prolific writer of poems. She used them to express her feelings, activities, friendships, and love of life. Often, family and friends would get a poem and a letter from her. She loved to write and receive letters, and everyone commented on her beautiful handwriting. In 2002, her granddaughter Jen and I gathered as many of her poems as we could find and put them together into a notebook that contains over 300 poems spanning 20 years. Mom stopped writing poems several years ago, but the memories are preserved in her writings. Signed, Tom. I invite Mary Ann to come to the lectern and read a couple of your grandmother's poems.
The first poem I'm reading is called Time. Time is an elusive butterfly, escaping entanglement or control. No matter if we laugh or cry, it has its own speed and destination. Time can be fickle or beautiful, boring but important and right. Time will wait for no man. We just reach out and touch a wing in flight. The second poem is called I Just Want You to Know. We pass this way but once and never get a choice or even a voice in the arriving or leaving time. Through the years we have seen the closing of a life in tragedy or muted grief as in a dream. It tells us to say over and over to all who are most dear that this visit has been fulfilling and laden with happy memories because they were near. I passed this way once and the time is going fast. All the love and joys will still be mine when the journey ends at last. God bless.
Thank you, Mary Ann. That was lovely. I've titled these remarks, A Marriage Becoming Real, Marilyn and Tom's Love Story. Do you remember the story of the Velveteen Rabbit? The rabbit who so wanted to become real. After years of much love and affection, when its plush was all worn off, the beloved toy knew that it was real. Like the Velveteen Rabbit, it takes years and years for a marriage to become real. The story of Tom and Marilyn's 50-year marriage is such a story. Marilyn asked me to share their story, and these are her words. Tom and I first met in junior high school. From the 7th grade through senior year, he dated one of my friends. We often double dated. And when Tom was a freshman at Ohio Northern University, and I was still a senior in high school, he invited his girlfriend to an engineer's ball. She wasn't sure she could go. She was a cheerleader, and it was a basketball tournament time. So Tom asked me to go with him. And that was the beginning of our story. The team lost, and I won a lifelong companion. I started college at Ohio State, and after a year, Tom transferred to OSU. We got married in 1962 at the ripe old age of 20 during his senior year. Their pictures are out there, by the way. It was one of the happiest, most carefree times of our marriage. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but we had each other, and that was all that we needed. Tom graduated with a degree in math education and intended to teach high school. Fate intervened, and he was offered a job in Lima, working as a computer programmer. He decided to go back to graduate school at Ohio State, but there was no degree in computer science. And so he had to do his studies in math, which he didn't want to do. He wanted computer science. Instead, he was offered a job at Battelle, and that began his long career. He retired in 1997 after 32 years at Battelle. While at Battelle, Tom served on the Creative Living Board of Trustees. This is a housing complex for young adults with severe disabilities. Most of the residents are quadriplegic, and Creative Living provides them housing while they attend college. The housing is fully accessible. Tom held several positions on the board, including president, and for a short time was interim director, all the while working at Battelle. Creative living was always a labor of love for him. It also became a family affair. In 1990, I was hired as the assistant director when they needed another hand in their office. Our daughter Jen worked there during the summers as a staff assistant during her college breaks, and now Ruth works there as a staff assistant while she's at OSU. After Tom started working full-time, we decided to start our family. Things did not go smoothly for us. After 2 early miscarriages and losing a baby at 6 months, we were discouraged and ready to give up. But we persisted. 7 years later, Andy was born. And 3 years later, a tiny little preemie Jen was born. And if you see Jen today, you will never believe it. We finally had our family. Throughout these difficult years, Tom was my cheerleader, my comforter, my consoler, and loving partner. I couldn't have done it without him at my side. During his career, Tom went on many business trips. I often tagged along. We went to Germany, Switzerland, and Washington State when Battelle had their interlab meetings in those places. Because their sibling affection for each other was at an all-time low, We took Jen and Andy on separate trips to Europe when they were in high school. They loved it. We formed a friendship with Jacques, a Battelle employee in Geneva, and his wife. They lived in France on the border of Switzerland. If you look on a map, they're right together there. We traded kids with them for 4 summers in a row, so each one could have an international experience. Andy even went back and lived with Jacques' family. He did his walkabout for the Worthington Alternative School at the International Organization for Religion and Peace in Geneva. Those experiences created wonderful memories for all of us on both sides of the ocean. In 2012, Tom and I took a wonderful 50th anniversary trip to France. We visited the winery Jacques now owns and learned about making sparkling wine. We went to Cassis on the Mediterranean Sea, then traveled with Jacques to southern France near the Pyrenees Mountains, where he had grown up. We got to meet Jacques' mother, who was nearly 100 years old and still living alone in their very, very old family home in the tiny village of Rodin. At the end of our trip, Tom and I returned to Paris on the bullet train, which is pretty cool, and spent 3 wonderful days in the museums, outdoor cafes, and walking all over the city. It was our 3rd time in Paris. Tom was always so proud of Andy and Jen. They were both good students, chose good friends, and rarely caused us any concern, except when they were going to go to Paris. Tom loved their friends who would congregate at our house, and several of them called him Dad. Tom was able to see Andy sworn in as the mayor of Park City, Utah in 2018. And before he died, he was able to see Jen in her cap and gown when she earned her master's degree in special education in 2020. Tom was the ultimate proud grandpa. He loved his 2 girls, Ruth and Mary Ann. He was thrilled when Ruth chose Ohio State. He had always been an avid Buckeye fan, especially of basketball, but he switched to football when Ruth became a member of the Ohio State Marching Band, better known as TBITL. TBDBITL. Fortunately, in his last 2 years, he was able to enjoy seeing her march at a couple of games and was even able to be with them on the field day for Family Day. Tom loved to teach Ruth how to fix things and use tools. And she's sitting here crocheting. Mary Ann and Grandpa had a very special relationship. They loved to sit at the dining room table and talk about everything. Simple, everyday, today events, and profound philosophical issues. At other times, he would simply be with her, rubbing her back, challenging her to figure out what letters he was rubbing on her back. It's sad that Tom did not live to see Mary Ann start college at Bowling Green and march in the BGSU band. He would have loved it, Mary Ann. In 1978, we bought a small college on the Indian River at the mouth of Mullet Lake in northern Michigan, not Virginia, Michigan. It's just around a bend in the river from where Tom's grandfather built a place in the 1920s. It became our vacation retreat and remains so to this day. Our kids and grandkids dipped their feet in Lake Huron and Lake Michigan by their first birthdays, just as Tom and his sister Peg had done when they were children. Tom was at his happiest in the boat with a fishing pole in his hand in the spreads or at channel marker 65 on the Indian River. We both loved to paddle out in our canoe and watch the beautiful North Michigan sunsets. Going to the cottage always has felt like going home. Part of Tom's ashes will be scattered at the cottage and near channel marker 65 in the river. Tom was a wonderful husband, father, grandfather, and friend. He loved people and he loved helping them whenever he could. He loved nature and being in the outdoors. He was an excellent photographer, and there are a lot of pictures out there to see. We have many photos to help remember our family, our travels, and our friends. But Tom was also an avid collector. Tom and Marilyn's first car was a VW Beetle. His largest collection of things is of Matchbox and Hot Wheels VW Beetles. He bought more of them than you can imagine. They fill one entire wall of one of our bedrooms. There's a very, very small sample of them out there. Going through our house, where we have lived for over 50 years, is like a treasure hunt. I never know what I might find, and each thing I find reminds me of the wonderful life we had together. I'm so grateful for that life. I miss Tom every day. SHMILY, which means, see how much I love you? Tom and Marilyn's marriage was made real. Through the joys and the woes, the laughter and the tears, the happiness and pain of the more than their 50 years together. It is a love story of two hearts and two minds. Amen. Blessed be. Thank you.
I'd like to share with you a very special story that was shared, and this one was actually written by Marilyn from your experience. Tom died on May 19th, 2020. In July, the girls and I went up to that cottage that Sylvia was speaking about. In September, I went back up by myself for the first time ever. I was concerned that I would be too lonely to stay. The day after I got there, I was in the backyard, and I saw a lone swan swimming down the channel. He just kept coming toward our cottage. I walked down to the dock, and he swam right up to within a few feet of where I was standing. He very quietly sat there on the water and stared at me. We locked eyes for several minutes before he slowly swam away. I immediately felt at peace, and I knew I would be okay there by myself. The next day, I was telling my friend Carrie, who lives there year-round, about my encounter with a swan. She said, "Oh, that's Lonesome George. We found his mate dead in the water a while back, and since that time, he stays here and wanders around the channel." I felt he was sent there to reassure me that I was really not alone. Marilyn said the Lonely George experience reminded her of a poem by Mary Oliver. Across the wide waters, something comes floating, a slim and delicate ship filled with white flowers, and it moves on its miraculous muscles as though time did not exist. As though bringing such gifts to the dry shore was a happiness almost beyond bearing. And now it turns its dark eyes, it rearranges the clouds of its wings, it trails an elaborate webbed foot, the color of charcoal, soon it will be there. Oh, what shall I do when the poppy-colored beak rests in my hand? Said Mrs. Blake of the poet, I miss my husband's company. He so often is in paradise, of course. The path to heaven doesn't lie down in flat miles. It's in the imagination with which you perceive the world and the gestures which you honor it. Oh, what will I do? What will I say when those white wings touch the shore? I'd like to invite Farrell Brody up. He's going to speak on behalf of the Old Farts group. Farrell, it's so good to see you again.
Tom Beerman was one of the good guys. Marilyn said that Tom was not a big joiner, but he joined the Thursday lunch group, the so-called OFs, and we all joined Tom. He was beloved by those guys, and it's an understatement to say that we miss him. Many of those OFs are here today, and maybe they would like to raise their hands to show us where they are. There they are, all around and in the back. Thank you. He so loved Marilyn and his daughter and his son and his grandchildren. It was such a pleasure, and we are blessed to have had this friendship and to have shared our days with Tom. Yes, we miss Tom. But the memory of this dear man will be with us until our own memories are gone and memories of us are left to others. So may this memory of Tom be a blessing for us all.
Thank you, Farrell. And now Tom and Marilyn's son, Andy, is going to come share with you. And we have a little bit of a tech setup here.
Well, Dad was the computer expert, not me, so we'll see if this works. We might need a reset over there. Bear with us just a second, but welcome everybody. I am Andy. I am the first child and son of Tom and Marilyn, and the product of much persistence and relief when they wanted to start their family. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay. We're in business. Thank you, Andy. Well, we lost Dad almost 2 years ago to the day, and what a long, crazy 2 years it's been since then. It's given us a lot of time to process and to grieve. Whoa, I see. I'm not in presenter mode. Did that fix it? Okay, you didn't want to see my notes. Thank you. 2 years later, I mean, Tom, it seems strange waiting so long for this remembrance, but I think it's almost fitting because Tom spent his entire life waiting on one or more of us. So hopefully this is the last time we'll keep him waiting. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And it's nice to see a full room and to know he had so many friends. I also want to make a special thanks to all of you that helped my mother get through this. It has been some very isolating times, and grieving under any circumstances can be incredibly difficult, particularly when you're in the middle of a pandemic and alone. But I know many of you were there for her. Many of you helped her through this process, and I want to offer you a special thank you for being there and helping our family. Well, Sylvia shared my father's history, and Farrell talked about his friendships. I'm going to do my best to focus on his character. And there was one principle that guided his life, and it was his family. To him, everything else was a distant second. I'm here today representing his immediate family, my mother Marilyn, my sister Jenny, and Ruth and Mary Ann, his granddaughters and my nieces. And I'm going to do my best to speak on everyone's behalf. To Tom's family, he's remembered as kind, as loving, as positive, always smiling. A cheerleader, occasionally stubborn, really handy. He could fix almost anything. And as Mary Ann liked to say, a goofball. Whether it was his kids or his grandkids, he was always there. And I mean always. He rarely missed a concert, a soccer game, and never missed a milestone. He always found the time and was never afraid to make a road trip if he needed to be there. Even during those years when his kids were ill-tempered teens, he might have had one or two of those, he found his ways to stay involved. So pictured here is his 1972 blue VW Beetle. I think that was his second bug he owned. And like most young men during my teen years, I struggled to get along with my father. I think it was mostly chemical. But I'm guessing it wasn't much fun for him to be around me during a few years through there. But while I was in high school, each morning we would load into his VW Bug, and on his way to work, he would drive me 15 minutes to school. And that would give us an opportunity to talk, or maybe some days just be together. But it was things like this, him always making those extra efforts, that made us feel loved, made us feel important, made us feel safe and secure, and always supported. So Dad used to kid that on paper he had a boring life. He had the same wife for almost 58 years. Yeah. He lived on the same block for over 50 years. His big move was across the street and 4 doors down. He was in the same job for 32 years. Went to the same cottage every summer. And he was partial to the very same fishing holes. In today's era, this is a feat. And it speaks to his quiet confidence and to his character. He knew what he liked. He knew what mattered, and he was satisfied. Perhaps this is why he was always smiling. He knew he had everything he ever wanted. This is not to say he was unadventurous. He also loved to travel, attend movies, shows, festivals, and to meet new people. And later in life, he became an activist, taking up causes that mattered to him and my mother. But briefly, I want to go back to boring. So Dad wore a suit and a tie to work for 32 years. And I got to tell you, as a teenager, I tormented him about it. I told him I would never in my life wear a suit and a tie to work. And I was committed. I made career choices all through my 20s and 30s to avoid ever having to wear formal attire. Well, I made it to 41. And at 41, I was a newly elected council member, and I was expected to go down to the state legislature and lobby on behalf of my city. So I went out, I bought a couple of suits, some nice shirts, some ties, some shoes. I was all ready to go. I get up my first morning, I'm supposed to go to the legislature, and one problem. I had no idea how to tie a tie. Lucky for me, my parents were out for a visit. Yep. And so at age 41, he finally got the opportunity to teach me how to tie a tie. And I gotta say, he was really gracious. He didn't tease me, but I could tell from the smirk on his face. It was all the satisfaction he needed. So clearly I'm overdressed here today, but I did want the opportunity to wear one of his ties. Well, when I think of Dad, he's never in a suit. He's in a t-shirt, likely one with a smiley face on it, a ball cap, and has a fishing rod in hand. Growing up, he had a pretty big job. He worked a lot. And so our vacations up north were his chance to relax, to read, to spend time with family, and to fish. He was an avid fisherman and started fishing as soon as he could hold a pole. You'll see in one of these pictures him 2 or 3 with a string of fish like this next to his sister. He just loved it. And but almost as much as he loved to fish, he loved to take us fishing. So I have a lot of fond memories of being out there during the golden hour, that quick period of time where the fish are biting. And instead of fishing, he was spending his time threading worms, fixing bobbers, untangling lines, but helping us have a great time. And when I think back to my father, that's when he was at his best. So I think for us, it's important that we will be scattering some of his ashes out there up north in Michigan, and somewhere close to where Lonesome George floats around nowadays. So I have to admit, I'm a little jealous of all the time that retired Tom got to spend with his grandkids. We've talked about already what a prolific photographer he is, and that might be an understatement. If you saw the boxes and boxes of pictures we have, spanning nearly 40 years, there is not a single family event that he missed. And this is just one example, 30 years apart, of family shot with Jenny and I, and then 30 years later with the 2 granddaughters, Ruth and Mary Ann. But it was an amazing trip through time to go through these pictures. Looking through the pictures, it's very clear to me that his focus, his main focus over the last 2 decades of his life were around his granddaughters, Ruth and Mary Ann. After retiring, he loved nothing more than to spend time with them. He read to them, he taught them to fish, taught them how to clean fish even. He taught Ruth how to use tools and fix things. He debated philosophy with Mary Ann. And along the way, he documented it all with thousands and thousands of pictures. And once again, he attended everything. Every play, recital, birthday, graduation, and most holidays. He was also very close to my sister, Jenny. and they spoke nearly every day. He was incredibly proud of her. But I'll tell you, if there's one thing that topped his pride, was the job she has done with her 2 daughters. She has been an amazing mother, raising both daughters. Tom and Marilyn, together since '62. So spouses can be friends, they can be lovers, they can be partners, they can be housemates. In my mother's case, she was everything to Tom. They married young and never looked back. They were 2 of the most compatible people I've ever met. And that isn't just something you say at a eulogy. They were always together, and they never fought. I lived in that household for 18 years, and I never saw a fight. I never saw a disagreement. I think I can think of about 3 times I heard the voice go up about a half an octave. They had something very special. And 58 years is a long time, and they were blessed to have each other. So Dad might have liked his routines, but he was never idle. He was always doing something, whether it needed done or not. Sometimes we called it swirling. He was finding things to do. Even as he aged, he was always game to experience something new. Each year they would visit Park City, come see me, but really they were coming out to see Sundance and visiting. But they became regulars at what was called the Slam Dance Festival. It was a side festival that we hosted, and they attended 16 consecutive years. I was working mostly at the time, so I had to live vicariously as they went to all the premieres and made all kinds of new friends, some of them quite odd, some of them famous, some of them interesting. But they became fixtures at the festival, and they started calling them the grandparents of this tight-knit slam dance group. And so they were asked to present the most important award of all, which is the Audience Favorites Award. And I want to take a minute just to have a little flashback about Dad or Tom and show a few lighthearted remarks by him one year when they were giving out the awards. See if this works.
Well, we're the couple you always see sitting together more up in the front, and if you wonder who we are, you now know. This is our 15th grade slam dance team. So it probably, we should know the process pretty well. We thank Slam Dance, we thank all the filmmakers. As gray hair or white hair folks, we may not relate to all your films, but we do appreciate and understand the effort and creativity you put in. So thank you. We did have a few firsts this year. Was the first time on Saturday, we marched down Main Street. There was about 10,000 other people with their pink hats and carrying signs. As Andy said, it was inspiring and hopeful to see so many people out there.
Okay. We'll end on inspiring, hopeful. I think that's a classic Tom. Okay, speaking of classic Tom, look at Dad here back, this was probably 70s. But as I mentioned earlier, Dad spent 32 years working for the same company. Until his 50s, he was very loyal and I would say somewhat apolitical. But this slowly changed. At Battelle, he began to grow concerned about the corporate indifference and about the growing gap and disconnect between the employees and the executives. And nationally, he became frustrated with the drift towards extremism. I believe this changed him, and he spent the last quarter of his life as an activist. This is one of those things I wish I'd told him more often and more directly how proud it made me. Farrell mentioned Dad liked to say he was not a joiner. What he meant like this, he was very reluctant about signing up for new organizations, for boards or groups. And he also struggled with organized religion. He liked the sense of community, but he never felt very comfortable with a particular denomination. Now, the Unitarian Church changed this. For the first time, he had found a church that fit. It brought him happiness and comfort and an inspiring community of new friends. In particular, he enjoyed his old Farts Club and their friendship. I'm grateful for Farrell for being here today to say a few words about that, and I'm grateful for their friendship, which he very much enjoyed, and as his health declined, he appreciated all the visits. So I want to wrap up with a little musing that Dad liked. I think at one point he had it framed and put up on the wall, and I found it in some of his papers. But it's called To the North. Up north. It's the place everyone seems to want to go, to escape the pressures and frantic pace of everyday life. But where is up north? For up north is not so much a location as it is a state of mind. So, how do you know when you've arrived up north? When you feel the cares of the world begin to slip away. When you feel yourself breathing a little deeper because the air seems purer somehow. When you notice the sky is bluer, the tree is taller, and the people smile a lot. Then you know you're up north. I'd like to believe that Dad's spirit's now free to roam in the north. He was a big fan of sunsets, and now he's had his own. The colors may fade away, but we have many pictures and fond memories. We sorely miss Tom, and we're especially going to miss him at future milestones, graduations, maybe weddings, great-grandchildren, maybe not, pets. We miss him when we're fishing, and we miss him when the Bucks play. It's awfully quiet. He lived a good life, was a wonderful husband, a caring father, a doting grandfather, and a good friend to many. He's physically left our presence, but he's left us many good memories and even more pictures. Family was his world, and he was the up north to our family. He made the sky a little bluer, the trees a little taller, and our smiles a lot bigger. We will continue to live, to love, to remember, but he will always be missed. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you, Andy. Oh, that's a lot of images and memories, but one thing that stands out is Tom's love for the water, Pier 65. So as we think about that, I would like to invite you to sing about some water. It's one of Tom's favorite songs and many of our favorite songs, Blue Boat Home. It's 1068 in your teal hymn book. There are more teal hymn books in the back if you need one. We will sing the full song, Blue Boat Home. But as the choir comes up to help us sing this, I'd like to share with you a memory, one of my memories of Tom. I remember on Sunday mornings after this service, Tom would always meet me out there in the welcome hall to say hello. And I don't actually remember what he said, but what I do remember is, no matter what, do you remember Tom's blue eyes that always sparkled? They always sparkled, and it seems like he also had a hint of, kind of an impish hint of playful wonder in there. And I just always enjoyed speaking with Tom and seeing him. It warmed my heart. And when Tom was in the hospital in the early days of COVID, which is, of course, why we're doing this service 2 years later, but it was the early days of COVID lockdown, and Marilyn couldn't go to the hospital, nobody could go there. It was just, you remember those horrible early days. And I remember that Amanda Hayes, who had just finished her ministerial internship here at the church, was serving as a chaplain residency at Riverside, I believe. Amanda, you're back here? Yes. And I called up Amanda, I said, I know we're not really supposed to be in communication because, you have to have your year away or whatever, but would you go see Tom? And Amanda, of course, said, oh, sure. So Amanda could slip in and see Tom because she was chaplain, right? And Amanda told me that one of Tom's favorite things was to go over a memory book, a scrapbook that Marilyn had made filled with pictures and everything. And Amanda just said that brought the love right back into the room. So thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Marilyn, for making the book. And oh my goodness, I just remember the smile in Tom's eyes, and I'm sure that book, those memories, made him smile as well. Whew. So with that, I invite you to rise and sing Blue Boat Home. Remember the water and remember Tom's blue eyes that always smiled. It's 1064, not 1068. Sorry about that. 1064.
Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in a beautiful blue boat home. I give sea before me, sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Please be seated. Thank you. We have paused this hour to remember Tom, a much beloved husband, father, grandfather, friend, and fellow first U-Uer, and a fellow lover of life. I invite Tom's family to come forward and help us extinguish our chalice. A bright spark of life left this world on May 19th, 2020. Tom's light has gone out, but his spirit lives on in his family, in his friends, and in our memories and in our hearts. The circle of life is open, but unbroken. You are invited to a reception in Beach Hall after the postlude, but if you would so choose to do so, you can join Marilyn and family as we go out to the Memorial Garden and scatter some of Tom's ashes. The family will then go to Beach Hall to join the reception so that we can all share stories and memories over what I understand is a wonderful reception with a lot of food. So you're welcome there. Now it is time for us, the living, it is time to leave. May the love of friends, the radiance of memory, the hope for an abundant life, the power of love fill us all with strength and peace, that we may greet the breaking of tomorrow's dawn with celebration and love for one another. Blessed be. Amen. Thank you so much for helping us celebrate Tom's life. And if you're going out to the scatter gardens, I invite you to bring a copy of the order of service.